Definitely a controversial placement. Sorry, not sorry. Hey guys, it's me Tantacles here with another tier list, and today I'm going to be tier listing the Legend of Dragoon all Dragoon magic. If you're new to the channel, don't forget to subscribe to my channel and like the video. So let's get started. So we'll start off with Dart. His very first spell, Flame Shot, is going to go into the A tier. It's a 50% power spell, it costs 10 NP, and you get it right at the beginning of the game, and it is immediately very useful for taking out enemies. And for the power you get from it, it's very efficient. Explosion is Dart's second Dragoon spell. It's a 25% power fire spell that hits all enemies. Because of the decrease in power along with the increase in MP cost, it's not that useful. Because it hits all enemies, if you have a bunch of water enemies, it can be good, but it will go into the C tier. Dart's third spell is Final Burst, and it's a 75% fire spell that hits a single enemy. Many of the bosses in this game are single target, so having this larger power spell is very useful, and it goes into the A tier. It's pretty much neck and neck with Flame Shot at the point that you get it. The higher MP cost means it can be a little less useful. I found that when I played the game, I would often use Special and Transform, and then use this spell, and it would do a ton of damage and obliterate a lot of bosses. Red-Eyed Dragon is next, and this spell is just wah wah. A funny bit of trivia about this spell, in-game it says that it's a 175% power all-enemy spell, and that is a typo. The spell is 75% power and hits all enemies. You're often better off just using Final Burst multiple times, as the lower MP cost means that you don't have to refill your MP multiple times. You'd think that casting a dragon would give you more power than just using Final Burst, but it doesn't, unfortunately, and so it's just not nearly as useful as any other spell. I don't really see any reason to use this above Dart's additions or Final Burst. The choices they made with Hashel's spells are very interesting because they're all single target with just varying power levels. Atomic Mind is Hashel's first spell, and it's going to go into the B tier. It has a good power level with only 10 MP cost, and Hashel has a pretty good magic stat once he Dragoons. It's also Thunder Element, which isn't amazing because Thunder resists it, but it hits no enemy's weaknesses. If Hashel could hit weaknesses, his magic would probably be higher tiered, but in fact, Thunder God, Atomic Mind, and Thunder Kid are all going to go into the B tier, and this is the order that I'd put them in, with Thunder God at the highest, Thunder Kid second, although a very close second because its power level is 65 with a 20 MP cost, which honestly is not a big decrease from Thunder God, which is 75% with a 30 MP cost. Violet Dragon, though, is a terrible investment. It has an 80 MP cost, still only hits single target, and has a 100% power level. So this is going to go into the D tier. It goes above Dart's Red Dragon because at least it gets a higher power level than his third level magic, but because of the high MP cost, I just can't justify putting it any higher than that. It's effectively garbage level. And most importantly, you're better off just using Hashel's additions because he has great speed and great strength. Next up is Kongol, and where I put Kongol's magic should come as no surprise. Kongol has no magic prowess, and all of his magic is going solidly into the D tier. I suppose you could boost up Kongol's magic stat to reasonable levels with items. However, he's so much better as a physical attacker. Lavitz and Albert are next. Wing Blaster is a 25% all enemy attack spell, and unfortunately it is garbage tier. Lavitz and Albert don't have the magic stat to use it effectively at all. However, I do find it weird that they gave Dart a 25% attack all enemies spell at level 2, and Lavitz gets it at level 1, particularly since he's the one who's worse at using spells. I would recommend you never use this spell in a casual playthrough. His second level spell is Rose or Blossom Storm, depending on whether Albert or Lavitz is using it. This spell is frickin' broken. If you're not using this spell, you have not played this game, because to be able to have all damage with no restriction is amazing. It is a totally broken mechanic, and it should be abused in every boss fight where your Dragoons aren't nerfed. I consider this spell to be the best spell in the game. Get this spell as soon as you possibly can. Gasplus is the level 3 spell, costing 30 MP. It's a 75% one-target wind attack. It can be somewhat useful, so I'm going to put it in the B tier. Again, though, Lavitz and Albert just don't have the magic stat to make this work, and they're much better off using Blossom Storm and physical attacks. The ideal playstyle, in my opinion, is to give Albert and Lavitz all of your speed items, make sure they only have 100 spirit points, Dragoon them, use Blossom Storm, and then they can immediately transform back and use additions. They can protect your entire team this way, and then because of their speed boosting items, they can dish out a ton of damage. Then, after using additions, they can retransform, recast Blossom Storm, and be ready to do the same thing again. Jade Dragon is a D tier spell. It's 75%, hits all enemies, not enough magic stat, You get the gist. Don't use this spell. Albert and Lavitz are so much better using their MP for Blossom Storm every single time. I cannot think of a single time when using this spell is helpful. Maru's up next, and Freezing Ring is her first spell. It's a 50% power, single enemy water attack, and it is at the very top of B tier. It has good power and an efficient MP cost. Rainbow Breath is Maru's second spell. It's a 50% all-party heal for 20 MP, and it is S tier. It is the best healing spell in the game, and it not only heals 50% of your HP, but it also heals statuses. So you can quickly transform Maru, you can heal the party for half of their entire damage, and remove status effects like Poison and Fear, and she still has great base speed to move fast in Dragoon form. Her third spell is Diamond Dust, and it is a 50% all-enemy water attack. It is at the top of A tier. The only characters who get 50% all enemy attacks, excluding Divine Dragon, which I'm not going to count because you get it so late that it doesn't matter, are Maru and Kongol. And again, Kongol has a terrible magic stat and a terrible speed stat, so you might as well not even bother. But Maru has a great magic stat, and this spell hits hard. It's very efficient MP-wise. And the extra bulk that Maru gets from her Dragoon form is extremely valuable, so you might as well have her Dragooned and use this spell multiple times if you can. Maru's final spell is the Blue Sea Dragon, and this is going to go into the B tier. This is probably the spell that I had the hardest time placing. It's a single enemy, 100% power water spell. Maru is one of two characters, the other being Shanna Miranda, that can actually use their final dragon spell effectively. However, what makes this spell less useful is that it's single target and it has a very high MP cost. Maru moves quickly and she's going to drain all of her MP, so often you might as well just use Diamond Dust. Or just use Freezing Ring if you want to hit things fast and hard and not have to restore her MP in the fight. She also often wants to use Rainbow Breath multiple times in a fight, and it's not worth it to drain all of her MP for Blue Sea Dragon. That being said, if you want to speed through bosses, it can be very useful. I just don't think it's as useful as her other spells. Rose is kind of an interesting case because early in the game, Rose's magic is extremely useful, but later in the game, it really falls off. And Astral Drain is the perfect example of that. Astral Drain is a 25% single target dark attack that also heals the party. Because of its healing power though, it was balanced by making it the only single target 25% power magic. Now at the beginning of the game, if you don't want to use Shanna, this is often your best source of healing, but later in the game, because it has such low power and you really need to do damage quickly on some of these later boss fights, it is going to go into the B tier. Death Dimension is a 25% all enemy dark attack that casts Fear. It has some niche use, but unfortunately it is just not the best spell because Rose's magic power isn't amazing. That being said, because of the Fear effect, it is a little bit more useful than Dart's Explosion, so I'm going to put it in the lower end of the B tier. It is worth using, especially if you're able to special Dragoon, but it's not worth using later in the game, and in most fights, Astral Drain is going to be the better choice because of the healing, or you can just have Rose use additions. Demon's Gate is Rose's third magic attack, and it's a 30 MP cost dark spell that causes death to all enemies. However, it doesn't work on bosses, and it's a chance of it working. It doesn't work all the time, so this goes into C tier for me. I just think you have better things to do in a casual playthrough than cast this with a chance of killing everything, especially since your MP is so precious. Dark Dragon is Rose's final magic attack, and it is not that useful, but compared to some of her other magic spells, it can have some niche use later in the game, and so I'm going to put this in the C tier. It's at the very bottom of C tier. I wouldn't use it often, but if you're dead set on using Rose, it can give you some really good damage against light-based enemies. But it just barely escapes the D tier, so I don't know. I think I'd say don't use it. The fact is, though, that it's her only hard-hitting spell, so you have to use it if you want Rose to do magic damage. Shanna is next, and Moonlight is her first spell, and when you get it, it is extremely useful. It does one of two things. It either heals your ally's HP completely, or it revives your ally with 50% HP. It does this at the measly cost of 10 MP. This would be S tier, except healing items later in the game aren't quite as sparse, so this spell really falls off, especially since it only heals one party member. So this spell goes into the very tippy top of A tier. Next up is Star Children, a 20 MP cost light spell that attacks all enemies with a power of 25%. This spell is in the B tier, probably just above Astral Drain. Unfortunately, the power level is just too low, and when you compare it to something like Maru's Diamond Dust, it's just not that useful. Shanna honestly is better used as a healer healer most of the time, although it does help that her speed is good, and it's definitely better than Explosion or Demon's Gate because of Shanna's high magic power. So if you're not running painfully low on MP recovery items, this is totally usable. That being said, her magic attack in human form is very good, so you might as well just throw consumable items. Next up is Gates of Heaven, and this is a full party heal that costs 30 MP, but it does not heal status effects. It's very good, but is bodied completely by Rainbow Breath, so it's gonna go into the B tier. The very top of B tier, but B tier nonetheless. White Silver Dragon is Shanna's final spell, and this is going to go into the A tier. I know I said Moonlight was the top of A tier, but actually White Dragon is the top of A tier. Now, it's almost S tier material. The problem, again, is the high MP cost. If you want to use this spell repeatedly, it costs 80 MP, so you have to have someone batterying Shanna's MP. It's a 100% all enemy light magic attack, and it also heals the entire party. So useful, but the MP cost really brings it down. That being said, in my first playthrough, this spell saved my butt so many times. Definitely a controversial placement. Sorry, not sorry. And finally, we get to Dart's Divine Dragon spells. Now, these ones are kind of weird. You get them for like a total of 5 seconds, but we're still gonna tier them anyway. The one thing I couldn't figure out, because I don't have a save file at the end of the game, is whether or not you can special with the Divine Dragon Spirit. That being said, I don't really think it matters. Divine Dragon Ball is a 50% power, all enemy, non-elemental attack. And honestly, at the point in the game where you get this, Dart has better things to do than be using any spell that has 50% power. This spell is in the D tier, probably right above Red Dragon because at least it gets AoE. However, at the end of the game, is there even any AoE? I'm pretty sure the final boss is all single target. Call me crazy, somebody tell me in the comments. He can do so much more damage with additions. I don't know why they made this spell so underpowered. Divine Dragon Cannon is a slightly different story. It's a 100% power, single target, non-elemental attack. It's gonna go in the bottom of D tier. Now, I'm not saying that Rose's Death Dimension and Astral Drain are better than this. I'm just saying at the point where you get the spell, it's so late in the game that you're not going to find many uses for it. And again, 100% power is good, but Dart has better things to do with his time than be using this spell. His final edition is so overpowered, just use that instead. And that's the tier list. Thanks again for watching. Subscribe to my channel, leave a comment, like the video, follow me on Twitch, link in the description. And if you like this tier list and couldn't get enough, watch my Chrono Trigger tier list or my Legend of Dragoon character tier list. Bye bye.